All right, so we're going to start out. I'm going to just show you the basic layout and how to do a walk cycle in Flash. Now, what I'm going to do is essentially it's cheating. I'm going to be tracing today, and most of you that aren't great artists, you may want to do the tracing. What my suggestion is if you have to trace to get the basic idea, trace, but then go back and refine. Go back and clean up the character, make it your own. So right now I'm going to use a bubble guy who's just kind of a fat, pudgy little dude. So feel free to, if you're going to trace him, to go back and add some additional features. If you're not going to trace, which I would prefer, then just try to make your character have a little bit of personality. But essentially what we're going to do is, to get this started, is I'm just in Flash, and I'm just going to do an ActionScript 3.0. It doesn't really matter which one of these that you choose, because we're not using any of the special features in Flash. We're merely going to use Flash as an animation tool. So here's my palette, and here are my frames. Now before I do anything else, the way that I like to set up my Flash when I'm doing a frame-by-frame animation is I like to give myself a bunch of blank frames. It's always easier to just give a bunch of blank frames right at first rather than add blank frames in later on. So to get a bunch of blank frames, all I do is I hit F6. And every time I hit F6, I'm going to get a blank frame. Think about these like pieces of paper. You're going to get a blank piece of paper each time. Okay, now I need a reference file. So I'm going to head to Safari, and I'm just going to type in walk cycle. And look at an image search. And the great thing is universally in most animation classes, they're going to use one of two textbooks. They're going to use the Preston Blair Cartoon Animation, which is actually like really, really basic animation. It's one of the simpler books out there. It's really good for beginners. Or the Richard Williams Animator Survival Kit. The Animator Survival Kit is almost entirely dedicated to walks. I mean, it's as you flip through the pages, you notice that just how important walks become. There's more time spent on walks than there are just about anything else. And when I looked up, when I just Googled walk cycle, if you look right here, this is Richard Williams example. This down here is a Richard Williams example. This is a Richard Williams example. The other one that shows up quite a bit is you're seeing this guy right here, and this is from a blog called idleworm.com or angryanimator.com. He has some tutorials on doing walk cycles in Flash. It's actually really quite cool the way that he's done it. As you scroll down, I wanted to find the Preston Blair walk cycle because that was the one that I use most often. And I think just because now I'm trying to make a recording of it, that's when I'm not seeing the Preston Blair walk cycle. So instead of wasting more time, I'm just going to come in and put in my search bar, Preston. Google will fix my spelling mistakes. All right, Preston Blair walk cycle. This is a really large image. It's going to work out really well. Excuse me. It's going to work out really well. So I'm going to go ahead and view the image. Right-click, save the image. I'm going to put it on my desktop. You feel free to put it anywhere you'd like. Then back in Flash, I'm going to go File and Import to Stage. That's going to import it into my main scene here. Gives me the option to select a file. This is the Preston Blair file right there. Gives me a nice big image to work with. Now this isn't sitting on my stage very well, but I don't care. In fact, I'm going to make it a little bit bigger. Remember, the cool thing about doing things digitally, and especially in Flash, Flash uses vector graphics, which when scaled do not blur. Kind of like as I've scaled this, you can see that I've started to get some pixelation. In vector graphics, you don't get that pixelation. So when you're drawing these things in Flash, we can always rearrange them. We can always change them, make them bigger or smaller. So this is a really good size. I'm just going to leave this be. One thing that I already messed up is I wanted to put this image on a different layer. So I'm going to just try to cut the image right now. So I'm going to go ahead and select the image, edit, cut, and create a new layer pop this up a little so you can see it a little bit better. In the lower right hand corner, there's a little like post-it note looking thing with a triangle in the corner. It looks like it's peeled up. That's going to give me a new layer. That allows me to stack things so that I can have a layer on the bottom that I can lock, and then a layer on the top that I can start animating on. So on my layer 2, I'm going to come in and just paste that item, and I'm going to lock it down. Now the reason I lock that layer down is I can't grab and move this image. So it's going to stay there for me, and I can't draw on it either. It's just going to stay locked. It means I can't edit it. Back up on layer 1. Now it's simply a matter of tracing. And again, I'm doing this more for speed than anything else. Feel free to try drawing it on your own. But if you feel like you have to trace it, you can. But again, you know how I feel about that. So I'm going to go ahead and I'm going to start drawing out the frame. I just start on frame 1. And I'm trying to do this fast, so this isn't an hour-and-a-half video. And I'm just going to go along and just trace Mr. Blair's walk. Now you notice that I'm not doing the shading, and there's a reason for that. I'll come back later and fix some of that up. So now in order for this walk to work, if I were to try to just trace this guy next on the next frame, he would appear to be teleporting. Now that doesn't do us any good. So what we actually need to do is we need to draw this character with his heel, where his heel is right here. His heel will be right here. We need to line those two up. So I unlock, so I go to my next frame, I unlock my background layer, I'm going to go to my select tool, I'm going to move it over. One thing that I forgot, I can't see my image, and the reason I can't see my image is I don't have onion skinning turned on. So right here, this is going to turn on onion skinning, and that's going to allow me to see my previous frame. So that when I'm on frame 2, I can still see frame 1, and it's just going to be a slight ghost. This would be the equivalent of using a light box, in that when you put a new piece of paper on, you're going to see a faint outline of the drawing before. That's why we use light boxes in traditional animation. So again, come in and move, and I want to line up the hill. That hill placement is very important. I lock my background layer back down, go to layer 1, grab my paintbrush, and I'm just going to trace this guy out one more time. Again, this is an interest of time that I am tracing. Okay? All right. So there's my frame 2. Now I realize that frame 1 and frame 2 are going to be a little bit different, but you'll notice that with animation, your eye actually tricks you just a little bit. So again, I just repeat the process. Go down to my layer 2, unlock my layer 2, go to my selection tool, move my reference layer. Now I haven't moved over a frame. It doesn't matter because right now I'm just adjusting, moving my reference frame. So I move my reference frame so that the foot is in the same location. Lock my reference frame down, my reference layer down, go to my next frame, grab my brush, and again, just quickly going through and tracing the image. Again, in interest of time, I'm not spending a whole lot of time trying to make this look good, but I do expect you to spend some time trying to draw at your best level. Okay, I go to my next frame, unlock my reference layer, move over, line up the foot, lock the layer back down, go to layer 1, select the frame, go to my paintbrush, draw it out, and this one's not going to look great, but that's all right. We're having fun. Okay, looking at it, I'm going to do the same thing one more time. Move over a frame, unlock my reference layer. Now instead of the heel location, he's shifted the weight to his toe, so I make sure to match the toe location. And lock the reference layer, come back to my first layer 1, grab my brush, and draw this. Now what I'm doing in about 20 minutes, each process on each frame should take you anywhere from 10 minutes to 15 minutes per frame, just in an effort to try to make sure your character looks nice and clean. Okay, now the beauty of doing something digitally is if you notice this frame, and I got to unlock my reference. If you notice that this frame and this frame are identical. The only difference is the shading is on the foot here and the shading is on the foot here. Well, I've already drawn 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 frames that represent one stride. To get the second stride, all I have to come in and do is copy and paste the original 5 frames. I will have to go in and erase some of the lines and to make sure that the shading and everything lines up. But in general, I can actually just kind of throw my reference layer away. I'm not going to actually throw it away. I'm just going to turn it invisible. If you watch, let me turn my onion skinning off. I just want to show you the walk. Now, this is built more as a 12 frame per second walk. If you wanted to do a 24 frame per second walk, you would need to add some in-betweens in between each. So instead of having 10 frames per stride, you may have 20 frames per stride. You may want to work on that. Most strides are actually 12 frames. So it just depends on what reference you're going to look at and those kinds of things there. So as I scroll through that, you can see that walk actually looks fairly decent. So now the process is simple. I go to frame 1. I copy the image. I'm using hotkeys, Command C. I go to frame 6 and I paste the frame. Now, it may be prudent to turn on onion skinning again so that I can grab my character, make sure that the toe lines up. Okay. Now I go to frame 2. I copy the frame on frame 2, go to frame 7, and I paste the frame. Again, got to try to line up either the heel or the toe, whichever one will work better. This guy's starting to kind of go downhill, but given the speed that I've done it in, I think we're okay. Okay, I go to the third frame and I copy it, and I go to the next frame there and I paste it. Again, lining up the heel. Okay, go to my fourth frame and I copy it. Go to my next frame and I paste it. I bring that down right there, again lining up the heel. I go to my fifth and final frame, I believe. I copy that. Go to my 10th frame, paste that frame, and put it right there. Now when I play, let me turn off onion skinning. It'll just make it look a little bit easier. When I play, he's walking. Now that's actually a really decent walk. Let me go ahead and remove these frames so that when I loop the animation, you can see that it actually works. Actually, I'm just going to throw my reference layer away. I don't need it anymore. So let me loop the animation. Okay, so you look at that, and that's a really decent, strut or a decent walk. The problem is this is not a cycle. Okay, the reason this isn't a cycle is because when he gets to here, he jumps right back to here. The way I've drawn my character is I've drawn him all the way across the screen. If you want this to be a cycle, he actually has to walk in place. So I have a couple of little tricks that I do to help me in Flash make sure that he's walking in place. If you were doing this on paper, it's going to be a little more difficult just because you don't have as much power to move the characters around. But we're doing this in Flash right now. So I'm going to come into frame 1, and on I created a new layer, a new reference layer, and I'm just going to grab a straight line, and I'm going to draw this straight line. I'm going to try to line up this character so that he is next to this line, and I'll do that on each frame. So I go to frame 1, and I'm just going to grab my character, and I'm going to move him over. Let me turn on onion skinning. That'll help keep things kind of somewhat regular. I'm going to grab this guy, and I got to push him back just a little bit. I'm going to line up the hand there. I'm going to grab this guy, and I'm going to line up the head there. Grab this guy, and again, lining up the head there. You may want to do a ground plane too. You notice that my guy was kind of walking at a diagonal. You can draw a ground plane as a good reference as well. Grab this guy. Oh, I didn't lock down that layer. Better do that. Okay, move that guy over. Go over one more frame. I didn't want to move that up, but that's okay. Move that guy over. Come right here. Drag that guy over. This guy's going to bounce a little just because I've moved them up. Again, a ground reference is also advisable. And one last frame. They're all lined up. He should be walking in place. Now, as I play through this, turn off onion skinning, make sure looping's on there. If I've done everything correctly, it's now a cycle. It can loop through this infinitely, and he'll walk forever. He'll walk until you tell him to stop. Now, I know that there are some issues with this. I can see that there's a little giddy up in his step. There's a little hiccups. Those are things that you go back and refine. You go back and you clean up your animation. I would clean up the shadows. I might even add pants and a hat or do some other fun things like that. But in a sense, that's the cycle. Now, if you're doing Flash, you can do some other fun things. I can actually just export this out as an image sequence, make it a little half-a-second clip of a film, or I guess it's 1 second because it's 12 frames per second. I can make a little 1 second film and then go into iMovie or Adobe Premiere and just repeat that second over and over and over and over and over again. And because it's a cycle, I basically choose how many times to repeat the cycle, and it'll look like he's walking forever. In Flash, I like to have a little bit of fun. I'm going to grab layer 3. I'm going to trash it. Layer 1, I'm going to copy all of these frames. So I'm going to select all the frames, right-click, copy frames, come in, paste the frames. Oops. Come in, paste the frames. Now, copy and paste doesn't work the exact same way when you're copying and pasting frames, so you've got to right-click and do it. And I'm just going to keep coming in and pasting frames. And let me do that right there. So now I have 3 seconds of walking. And looking at it, I don't think that there are... Oh, it's not doing the whole cycle. Okay. Okay, so now I have 3 seconds of walking. So something that I could do that, I don't know, that could be fun, something that I did yesterday is I'm going to grab a new layer, and on this layer I'm going to draw a tree. And, oh, that was supposed to be green. Because nobody ever heard of a black tree before. Yeah, I guess after a forest fire, right? Okay, so, and I am doing this so that it gives a little color. It's ugly, I realize that. You'll forgive me. Okay, so now on this frame right there, my tree sits here. I'm going to come over to the frame 50, which is the end of our little cycle here, and I'm going to right-click and I'm just going to hit Insert Keyframe. And in doing so, I can now take my tree on frame 50 and I can move it backwards. Okay, so now I have on frame 1 my tree's there, on frame 50 my tree's there. I select the 2 frames so that the timeline's selected, and I go to Insert, or let's see, where is it? Yeah, Insert Classic Tween. And all that does is now it gives my background something to do. This was an old trick of Hanna-Barbera that they used to just cycle their backgrounds over and over again. If you watch the Flintstones, you can start seeing the same house show up over and over again. So, I mean, it's just a simple trick. The character doesn't move, the background moves, but because the background's moving, it makes the character look like he's moving. So where the tree's moving, because the character's standing in place, it just looks like he's walking across. And that's the cycle. This was a big, long explanation on how to do this, but I promise you that if you spend time to try to master this concept, everything else in animation will fall into place.